Bottom line, if there was a global flood that killed everybody and only 8 souls were preserved, then number one, yes, we are all related. And number two, we should be able to explain this concept of the races. Where did they come from? Now, I want you to understand, I'm going to be using society's definition of the word race. That is skin color. But the Bible is very clear that there is only one race, and that is the human race. What is it that you and I need to know about races? Simply put, skin color is caused by a biological pigment known as melanin. Everybody has melanin in their melanocyte cells, and the amount of melanin that you have is strictly determined by your mother and your father. Geneticists have come along, they've said, okay, we're going to try to designate abbreviations, for instance, for how much melanin somebody has. So, for instance, big A, big B, big B, that would be the designation applied to somebody maybe that has the darkest skin possible. Capital A, capital A, capital B, capital B. Or we use maybe lowercase letters, small a, small b, to indicate somebody who has recessive genes, that doesn't have a large quantity of melanin. Little a, little a, little b, little b. What would we call somebody that has absolutely no melanin in their skin? That's a condition we call albino. And if they are true albinos, what you see is kind of a pinkish hue because you're looking through their skin at the capillary bed below. They're almost translucent. That is a mutation that has come up in our gene pool since creation. But let's take it back. Let's see if there's a way that we can figure out how we get all the different colors around us. In fact, let's take it all the way back to Adam and Eve, just 2 people. Look at Genesis chapter 3, verse 20. Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living, telling us all the lineage of humanity was coming through Eve. That means there are not little pockets of people all over the place. That means that God didn't just set, and by the way, for those of you who've always wondered about where'd Cain get his wife, the answer to that has to lie in that verse. Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. Had to either be a sister or a niece. So let's see if we can take 2 people. We'll call them Adam and Eve and figure out how we got all the different colors. For instance, what if Adam and Eve were really, really dark-skinned people? Big A, big A, big B, big B. What would we get from a cross with those 2 parents? Well, we would get all their children would be big A, big A, big B, big B, right? They'd all be very, very dark skinned. Now, is that what we see around us today? Nope. So I can stand here in front of you today and I can tell you, Adam and Eve, they weren't real dark skinned people. And you get that look on your face and you say, hold on, Brad, wait a second. You can't say that. Because we're living in a politically correct environment. You might offend somebody. And you're right, I might, but just wait your turn. I'm going to probably offend every single person. I can tell you, they weren't real dark skinned. What about fair skin? What about little a, little a, little b, little b? What if we had 2 parents who were both fair skinned? What would all of their offspring be? Again, little a, little a, little b, right? Is that what we see around us? No. So now I'm back to offending everyone because I don't think Adam and Eve were fair skinned. I realize every summer we get that Vacation Bible School packet and it's got the blonde hair, blue-eyed Eve. Folks, that's not the reality. In fact, when we ask what is it that we see, we know that according to the world's population, 55% is Caucasoid or Caucasian, 37% is Mongoloid or Asian, and 8% is Negroid. All right. What if God used one dark skin and one light skinned? Maybe Adam was dark, Eve was light. What do we get then? On the screen, there is what geneticists call a Punnett square. It's what we use to try to predict offspring. You'll notice across the top, we'll say this is Adam. He's the capital A, capital B. Down the left-hand side, we've got Eve, lowercase letters. Inside each one of those 16 boxes is the potential for their offspring. And in this case, all 16 are right down the middle tan. Is that what we see around us today? Is everybody right down the middle tan? Nope. Somebody says, you're running out of options. And you're right. But I do have one left. And that is, what if God had used two people with a mixture of genes? In science, we call this heterozygous. Basically, it would be two individuals who have that beautiful mocha color. What are the potential offspring from two people with those skin color genes? On the screen, you see it ranges anywhere from one very fair skin, 4 light tan, 6 tan, 4 darker brown, all the way up to one very dark-skinned person. Now, friends, I can get you that with just 2 people. How many walked off the boat? There was 8. You give me 8 people, and you mix in the fact that today we can get in cars, trains, and planes, and we can fly between cultures, and all of a sudden you realize why we have the rainbow of colors we have around us today. And somebody says, wait a second, time out. I'm not buying it. I don't think you can get different color people from 2 parents like that. Well, again, let's look at what the evidence actually shows. For instance, just a few months ago, there was an article with a young lady, age 16. She asked the question, can you guess my secret? Her secret is she has a sister who is dark-skinned. Likewise, there was another news clipping that was called Mixed Doubles. Had a dark-skinned mom with a light-skinned, fair-skinned child. It had a light-skinned dad holding a dark-skinned child. You see, what I'm telling you is not just theory in a book, but rather it's reality. And somebody says, whoa, time out. That doesn't explain, for instance, Brad, why we would have a predominance of dark-skinned people around the equator and fair-skinned people in Europe. That's evolution. No, actually, what you're trying to communicate to me would be more about racism. And we don't even see it. Let me explain to you what I'm talking about. In textbooks today, they're teaching our children that man evolved up out of Africa, dark skin, lots of hair, and after finally evolving further, several hundred years later, white man comes out of Europe. Now, folks, I don't care how you look at it, that is teaching that white people are further evolved, that they are a superior race. I don't care how you look at it, that's racism to a T. And yet here's the funny thing, we're teaching it in textbooks and nobody even questions it. How do we explain a predominance of dark-skinned people around the equator, light-skinned people in Europe? Let's use both science and the Bible. We go back to why people were actually dispersed. You remember a couple of hundred years after the flood, God told him, he said, spread out. They were building a tower up to Babel. They didn't, so he punished them. So he changed their language. He confused their languages. I want you to imagine we've got 1,000 people, all different colors, and they all speak Swahili. They're all finding each other at the base of the Tower of Babel because they recognize each other's dialect. They recognize that language. 1,000 people, rainbow of colors. They all migrate down towards the equator. Who is going to fare better in that environment closer to the sun? The dark-skinned people or the light-skinned people? It would be the dark skin. And here's why. The melanin that makes their skin dark also protects them from the sun's harmful UV rays. The more melanin you've got, the more protection you've got. It would be the fair-skinned people that would be the ones dying off from skin cancers and such, whereas the darker-skinned people, they've got a built-in advantage. So does it make sense after a few short generations that there's going to be a predominance of dark-skinned people there? Absolutely. Folks, that's not evolution. How about this one? What about we've got 1,000 people, the base of the tower, all different colors, and we'll say they all speak maybe Swedish. They all migrate up towards... Is there a reason that we can give that after a few generations there will be a predominance of fair-skinned people? Absolutely. For you see, in those northern European areas, they don't get a whole lot of sunlight. And we need sunlight. We use it to make vitamin D. If you look here on the screen, you'll notice a situation where you've got UV light distribution showing Northern Europe doesn't get a whole lot of sunlight. And that's an area where if you've got melanin in your skin, let's say you're dark skinned, you're not going to be able to take advantage of what little sunlight is available. So does it make sense that the fair-skinned people would have an advantage? We need that sunlight to make vitamin D to be able to absorb calcium. Otherwise, we start suffering from bone disorders and such. Rickets, osteoporosis. Does it make sense that the fair-skinned people would have an advantage? Absolutely it does. Where is the only place on the planet where this rule is violated? Where is there a dark-skinned people where you don't get a whole lot of sunlight? That's the Eskimos. Now ask yourself, where do they get their vitamin D? The answer? From the fish, the oils. You see, friends, God really does have this thing tightly knit if we would just open up His Word and look into it.